In the last few years, it has been my goal to augment the energy works to increase support to ARENA members towards achieving the energy transition targets. The agency has worked around the clock in subsequent years, in these years by setting up a dedicated project facilitation division to steer our support for ARENA members' energy projects to attract investment. Through our project facilitation and support division, we have developed two initiatives that directly focus on mobilizing projects of various scopes and sites and funding and de-risking solutions to take them forward. I'm talking about the Climate Investment Platform and the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, the so-called ETAF. As the result of these efforts, each with a targeted mandate and funding partners to support it while complementary in terms of supporting the energy transition. In our work, ARENA plays a coordination role by providing platforms that match priorities project developers with financing solutions. Whilst the agency is not a fund manager and not a financial institution, we are focused on our mandate as facilitators of the energy transition for the benefit of our members. ETAF is an inclusive multi-stakeholder climate finance platform launched by the United Arab Emirates at COP26, anchored with funding from the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development. At COP27, we welcome 3 additional partners, namely Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, Masdar, and Swiss Re, a Swiss insurance company. The support of our partners enables us to mobilize close to our initial target of $1 billion at the end of 2022. We capitalize on this momentum to continue discussion with additional partners, and this morning we witnessed the signing of intention of the OPEC Fund to join ETAF in 2023. Aside from mobilizing funding, ETAF's second role is to present a robust pipeline of projects to match the funding partners' condition for supporting them. This role is sometimes that requires urgent intervention as members. In addition, ETAF is a platform to enable discussion such as the one we are having today. Funding facilitative solutions for renewable energy projects require continuous focused engagements, addressing the demand and supply side issues to reduce barrier to financial close for projects. The agency is looking to you, the representative of ARENA members, to support this effort by mobilizing eligible public and private projects to join the platform. My expectation is that through today's session will highlight the critical factor that will enable members to utilize the opportunity presented through the ETAF platform to deliver renewables in developed countries. I wish to say as clear as possible that our intention is to work as hard as possible with our partners to be ready to present in the occasion of COP28 in Dubai a good bunch of projects that have already finalized their process to be funded. We want to showcase this experience in a way that we can demonstrate, first of all, that it's possible in a reasonable time, and it's possible to make good projects be implemented in all parts of the world, with naturally special emphasis in the most disadvantaged country. So I really encourage you to work as soon as possible and as effective as possible to present good proposal to our attention. We will work with you to refine the documentation in our facilitating role, and then we will move to our partners. They will do their task, their due diligence, and we as ARENA, we will be beside the member states in the dialogue with the funders. We will take this very seriously because I think this could be very important for the future of the agency. So that please feel engaged, and I would like to thank our partners, the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, Masdar, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the Swiss Re. We will deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director General, for your remarks. And I now invite Dr. Ahmed Mohamed Mohina, First Undersecretary at the Egyptian Electricity and Renewable Energy Sector, representing His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Sheikher El Markabi, Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy of Egypt, to deliver his keynote address. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to extend the greetings of His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Sheikher, the Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy in Egypt. And he would like to attend this important event, but unfortunately, due to a sudden work commitment, he couldn't join us today. So I have the honor to deliver his speech on behalf of him. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government of Egypt and indeed on my own behalf, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the International Renewable Energy Agency for inviting me to take part in this event. I would like also to thank the International Renewable Energy Agency for its efforts to enhance renewable energy deployment all over the world. And a special thanks for our brothers from United Arab Emirates for hospitality and for supporting and hosting IRENA for many years, and also for financial support for the previous facility and the upcoming facility or upcoming platform. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, discussion about renewable energies today as a substitute for fossil fuel has become unavoidable because of its impact on all areas of development, environmental, social, and economic benefits. The global transition in the field of energy has become a necessity as it is considered as an infrastructure for sustainable economy with unlimited opportunities for international cooperation efforts that seek to achieve higher rates of growth, taking into account social benefits as well as avoiding the risks of reliance on a fluctuated fuel security of supply and the prices. The Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, ETAF, will continue enhancing the vital role of IRENA, Abu Dhabi Fund for Development Facility, that implemented from 2013 to 2020, in supporting renewable energy deployment, especially in the developing countries. It's worth mentioning that Egypt has donated several volunteers experts who participated actively in its both experts and consultative committees throughout the 7 cycles of the facility. The ETAF platform is currently securing more than $1 billion for mobilizing capital to scale up renewable energy project funding in developing countries by 2030. Moreover, it will contribute to the realization of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals while serving strategic national objectives such as energy access and security, economic diversification, and sustainable impact. In this regard, Egypt is looking forward to enhance these efforts in cooperation with IRENA through the co-chair rule with the Australian government of the collaborative framework of project facilitation that announced in May 2022. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly share with you what Egypt has done to address that matter and to create enabling environment to clean energy transition. Egypt is rich in renewable energy resources, especially wind and solar, that qualify it to be one of the major renewable energy producers. The total potential capacities, about 347 gigawatts from wind energy, according to Global Atlas, and there is a huge potential from solar energy, about 647 gigawatts. Now, Egyptian electricity sector are working to exploit nationwide wind resources in order to maximize the proven and valid potential of renewable energy. In addition, the Egyptian electricity sector is working on modifying networks to be able to evacuate electricity from the renewable energy generation facilities. The Integrated Sustainable Energy Strategy for 2035 was approved, in which the share of the renewable energy in the energy mix will reach 42% by 2035. Currently, the energy strategy until 2040 is being updated in light of global developments related to renewable energy technologies, development of technologies for energy storage, and the new trend towards hydrogen. To achieve our ambitious vision in utilizing the renewable resources, a lot of procedures has been taken and incentives offered to encourage private sector participation in the sector projects based on our conviction that the private investments will play a major role in achieving our target. As a result of these procedures, a great number of investors became confident in the Egyptian electricity and renewable energy sector. A foreign and the domestic private sector investors have been encouraged to invest in the sector projects. Currently, the total installed capacities from renewable energy reaches 6,096 megawatts from hydro, wind, and solar, and by the end of 2025, the total capacities from renewable energy in Egypt will reach 10 gigawatts. We have already received offers from wind energy projects of about 40 gigawatts from different international developers. In this context, during the activities of COP27, 4 MOUs were signed with local and international companies and the alliances in the field of wind energy projects in order to add 28 gigawatts of wind energy based on the purchase price of an energy unit $2.4. This confirms the ability of renewable energy in Egypt to attract foreign direct investment and emphasizes the role of a national institution in the creation of investment. Climate enjoys low risks and the positive interaction with the funding institution and development partners. It is worth mentioning that Egypt's country platform for the nexus of water, food, and energy, NWAFE program, has launched in July 2022. This program aims to accelerating the national climate agenda and provides opportunities for mobilizing climate finance and private investment to support Egypt's green energy transition, reflecting the interlinkages and the complementarity between climate action and development efforts. It was developed on the back of the announcement of Egypt's 2050 country climate strategy and the nationally determined contribution indices. The energy pillar of NWAFE program aims at the commissioning of 5,000 megawatts of existing inefficient oil and gas fuel power generation capacity and facilitate investments of more than $10 billion to support the installation of 10,000 megawatt of new renewable energy capacity through a range of market routes, open to local and international projects developers. The NWAF program is a national model for mobilizing climate finance and the private investment for adaptation and mitigation projects. I would like also to refer that during COP27 activities, Africa Just and Affordable Energy Transition Initiative has been announced as a participatory framework between the African continent countries and several international partners. The African continent countries and several international partners and the funding organization to achieve constructive communication to accelerate a just and sustainable transformation for the continent. The initiative aims to achieve some objectives as follows. First, to consolidate and facilitate technical and policy support that countries financially viable, securing access to affordable energy by 2027 for at least 300 million African people. Second, transition towards clean cooking for 300 million African people by 2027. Third, transition towards green energy by increasing the share of the renewable electricity generation by 25% by 2027. I would like to thank our partners from IRENA, Sustainable Energy for All, and the International Energy Agency for their constructive efforts and wishing to continue our cooperation with them beside participation of additional international bodies and institutions into the initiative to ensure the achievement of its objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, hydrogen is getting increasing attention as one of the decarbonized fuels of the future, which can significantly contribute to the energy transition of a range of energy and carbon-intensive sectors, whilst unlocking additional benefits from renewable power generation. On March 2022, MOU was signed with EBRD to provide finance for consultancy work regarding the national hydrogen strategy in Egypt. The structure of the strategy has been done, and most of the strategy issues has been finished. It is expected that the full strategy documents in a short time. The strategy has visions that Egypt will be one of the global leaders in the low-carbon hydrogen economy. Depending on the excellent renewable resources and its strategic location, Egypt will take advantage of its competitiveness to fulfill its ambition plans for hydrogen sector, targeting up to 8% of the global tradable market by 2040. In parallel with the preparation of the strategy, many international and local alliances have submitted requests for cooperation in the field of green hydrogen. And 23 MOUs were signed in order to start preparing technical and financial studies. The conference, COP27, witnessed many events related to green hydrogen projects, including the opening of the pilot project for the production of green hydrogen with a capacity of 100 megawatt, in addition to the signing of framework agreement for green hydrogen production projects with 9 developers, as well as MOU was signed between the European Union and the Arab Republic of Egypt regarding the strategic partnership in the field of green hydrogen. In addition, a joint declaration of intent between Egypt and Germany signed to cooperate in the field of green hydrogen, with the aim of securing clean energy supplies, achieving sustainable development, and confronting climate change. I would like also to refer to the initiative that has been launched during COP27, Activities for Renewable Hydrogen Global Forum, which launched by our President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, which will represent a platform for a sustainable dialogue for renewable hydrogen between all stakeholders all over the world. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to conclude by emphasizing on the importance of renewable energy as a fundamental way of the clean energy transition and have the potential to boost economic growth without leading to increased greenhouse gases emissions. It is crucial that climate finance should represent a progression beyond previous efforts and be scaled up with the concrete step to meet new goals. The predictability and accessibility to means of implementation, especially climate finance, is a cornerstone in facing climate challenges. Finally, we hope that the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, ETAF, will achieve its targets for mobilizing investments for large-scale renewable projects and supporting the implementation of ambitious national determined contribution NDCs to meet the Paris Agreement targets. I wish you a successful deliberation and constructive discussion, and thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your remarks. I now invite Dr. Nawal Al-Hosani, UAE's Permanent Representative IRENA, to deliver her keynote address. Excellency, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies, Director General, ladies and gentlemen, everybody, good afternoon. I hope everybody had a nice break and enjoyed the lunch. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you here today as a very proud founding partner of the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform. The UAE is keen to continue building on our long history of cooperation with IRENA to finance renewable energy projects in developing countries around the world. Mobilizing finance for energy transition will be a crucial differentiator, a differentiator that determines whether we achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and whether we are able to cut emissions 43% by 2030 to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. Scaling and improving climate finance will also spur a raft of new economic opportunities across the globe. Initiatives, ladies and gentlemen, like ETAF can lead the charge of a future where climate finance is actually the norm. Ladies and gentlemen, we meet here today in Abu Dhabi against a geopolitical and socio-economic backdrop marked by multiple complex challenges. But as these challenges unfold, it is essential that we do not lose sight of the importance of the climate crisis and the role that finance must play in stemming the tide of climate change. Climate actions cannot take a backseat. Climate action must drive the international agenda. We must set up the challenge of balancing energy security and driving climate progress. Today, and you heard this many times, more than 700 million people continue to live without access to electricity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 2023. That is simply unacceptable. We must improve affordability. We must expand accessibility, and we absolutely must secure energy for all. To deliver on this urgent need, mobilizing finance must sit at the heart of our efforts. The ETAF platform is a direct response to the three of those missions. It is purpose-built to expand clean energy investments within the membership of IRENA, focusing on accelerating support across the Global South. This has the benefit of expanding energy access to those who need it and reduce emissions at the same time. Renewable energy access has rightly been called an accelerator of sustainable development. It has the capacity to boost progress across each of the Sustainable Development Goals. It enhances healthcare and expands access to education. It drives economic prosperity, giving developing economies the chance to leapfrog development based on hydrocarbons to create new growth, jobs, and opportunities from clean energy. The potential of renewable energy is indisputable, and it is the future of our energy systems. It is the future that is already well underway. In 2022, and we heard from Irina that renewables accounted for 81% of all new energy capacity added last year. Wind and solar are now the most affordable new energy sources for power. Two-thirds of the cheapest renewables are less expensive than the cheapest coal. And recent findings suggest that in the next 5 years, renewable energy will equal the total capacity added in the last 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, at COP28 in November, financing for the energy transition will be a priority agenda item alongside the global stocktake. IRENA estimates that investments of at least $100 trillion are needed in green energy technologies by 2050 if we are to achieve our net zero targets. This is an investment that no country and no company can manage alone. We need government budgets, multilateral agencies, development banks, and private sector investment all working together towards these objectives. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, precisely why the UAE is setting out to facilitate through COP28. Our hope is to respond to the global stocktake with a bold and practical action to address mitigation and accelerate the energy transition. We need to drive renewables forward while decarbonization existing supplies and investing in breakthrough technologies for hard-to-abate sectors. The central challenge and the key opportunity is to leverage private finance. Renewables offer a clear-cut and compelling case for investment, and yet, despite the low cost of technology, many developing countries to be plagued by perceived risk, resulting in high cost of capital that slows the deployment of renewables. ETAF is a crucial part of the solution. It can help us move beyond traditional conventional finance to raise ever greater multiple of private finance. Since its conceptualization in COP26 in Glasgow, ETAF has now secured $1 billion, as we heard from colleague, and as the Director General mentioned, $400 million were the anchor fund from the UAE. With this solid foundation, ETAF can catalyze the next generation of climate finance. Ladies and gentlemen, several projects are already in the pipeline, and the first pipeline meetings have been held here at on the sideline of the IRENA Assembly. We believe that this will allow IRENA to assess its scope, geographic coverage, and impact. It will ensure that the projects directly contribute to Paris Agreement, the national climate commitments, and the SDG 7 on renewable energy. On behalf of the UAE, I commend all of those who have submitted projects and are committed to getting them off the ground. Those concrete, action-oriented projects are precisely what we hope to galvanize at COP28 in November. And we are very much look forward to continuing our collaborative with IRENA and the partners of ETAF to showcase these successes and mobilize more action, more resources, and more progress to protect our people, planet, and our shared prosperity for this generation and for those to come. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Excellency, for your remarks. I now invite His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin, United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and United Nations Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP27 to deliver his keynote address.
Right, thank you so much for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to address you today. Excellencies, Director General, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be in Abu Dhabi, in the United Arab Emirates. A good reminder of a place, city, and a country that took vision, operationalizing it very seriously. Earlier today, in another session that was attended by the Director General, spoke in a panel about the investments in innovation, diversification, and going beyond oil and natural gas in a country that is very much rich in both. And that is not really new, had been there for quite some time. I shared the good vision of His Excellency, the President of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, when the challenge of the prospects of oil in the future, and that was in 2006 in the opening up of Masdar, he said that we have a country that is going to celebrate the export of the last barrel of oil one day because we are going to be prepared for it. And this area of investments in renewables, making this country a center for energy, regardless of the source, is a good example. And investments in the human capital, which is definitely much more important than all sources of energy or other assets, have been very much realized and benefiting not just the country, but this country and beyond. Having said that, with this initiative of acceleration, and it's great to see this kind of great interest for having stronger energy transition. This is a key accelerator to mitigation efforts. We know that the sector of electricity as it comes today and energy as it stands today are responsible for 75% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So when we are investing more, we're going to be having many targets met to avail electricity and energy, as Her Excellency mentioned, for those who are deprived from it. And we know that they are in Africa. Out of the 800 million, 600 million are in sub-Saharan Africa. And referring to the good presentation by the Milula earlier this morning, that's not just the 600 million, it's approximately 1 billion people suffer from one way or another of energy poverty. So what we can really be doing in availing energy, clean, efficient energy, secured energy, that would be really a good target to achieve. SDG 7 with very strong connections to the rest of the SDGs. Some very positive prospects, even in a year that was overwhelmed by crises, including the conflict in the Ukraine, that the conflict there had reminded everybody that it's important to diversify the sources of energy, and there is renewed interest in investments despite the constraints. In a world, referring to the World Bank recent figures, that is going to be seeing a decline in investment compared to the figures of 2019-2020 by 7%, still the interest in investment in energy at large and renewable energy in particular is still very much strong. It's good to see as well that 90% of global energy growth is coming from the renewable sources. We saw in Sharm el-Sheikh, as mentioned by His Excellency, the First Under Secretary, that there is an approach to get all sources of renewed energy sources, of new and renewables, at the priority of the agenda of Sharm el-Sheikh. We saw that as well connected to a nexus linking that to water, food systems, and agricultural development. So when we talk about acceleration of SDG 7, it's very much connected as well to investments in related activities on the rest of the sustainable development. But we need to be mindful to the fact that these kind of promising figures are still telling us that they are not even, and there is a great deal of discrepancy. And I referred earlier to the challenges facing us, especially in Africa, in the sub-Saharan part of it. So for our transition to be just, this must be rapidly accelerated, and we need to see the different sources of finance, and we need to take a holistic approach to all of that, and we need to do all of this in a world that is suffering from variety of crises. We are very much suffering from surplus of crises and perhaps deficit of trust at the same time. So what we need to do basically is to, when we are designing this transition with accelerated pace, we need to put into consideration the following. First, that the logic that comes from old wisdom from this region, that the prevention of harm is much more important than bringing the benefits. So when we do the kind of finance required for renewables, we need to make sure that this will be from sustainable sources of funding, and we shouldn't be relying more and more on debt, unless forms of debt are going to be of long-term nature, of concessional nature. And for that, during Sharm el-Sheikh, we proposed as climate champions the proposal of the 1% for the 1.5 degrees. For the 1.5 degrees to be alive, we need 1% maximum of cost of funding to be available for developing economies. We need that as well to be coupled with a longer grace period. We know that IDA, for instance, in the World Bank Group, can avail funds of 7 years and more as grace period, and with maturities that could exceed 30 to 40 years. Even the IMF, with the Resilience and Sustainability Trust Fund, it offers now funding of, with grace period of more than 10 years, to be exact, 10.5 years, and with grace period of more than 20 years. Of course, here the cost of funding is much more than the 1%, but this is the argument. If the $100 billion that have been promised since Copenhagen and then renewed in Paris, this could be used in order to reduce the cost of borrowing for developing economies at large, and not just to the low-income countries. So as champions, we worked, and mindful of the time, I'll just share the following. First proposal that we worked on is a proposal to support the reform and enhancing the role of the international financial institutions, and of course there is a great deal of talk, and I hope that there will be some work that we will see its outcomes from very soon on the MDB reforms. We are identifying gaps of $4 to $6 trillion a year for a world that needs to be on the path towards energy transition. And the MDBs need really to work hard to leverage the private sector finance on that, because even if they have capital increase, that will not be sufficient to close the gap. The only way to do it is not to crowd out the private sector, to enhance it, and to leverage it further. And I just mentioned as well the new structure that we are proposing, the 1% for the 1.5 degrees. At the same time, we shouldn't really forget that energy has this important role as an ultimate connector between the different SDGs, including water and food. And both, we had many challenges, and actually a crisis in one that we realized last year. And then on the third aspect of work, on how to bring different stakeholders to provide more work in the future. For that, I was happy to see in the COP27 that there was some serious work to build on the outcomes of Glasgow, on the GFANs, and to provide a pipeline of projects, because when we see asset managers, when you see those who are part of the GFAN, they will tell you that we have the assets behind us and we have the capital, but we don't see pipeline of projects. So to provide a practical answer to this challenge, the Egyptian presidency of COP27 with the UN system, the regional economic commissions, and with close work that we took with the private sector, including the GFANs, we built a pipeline of projects from the 5 regional economic commissions around the world, and all of these projects that were presented were fully owned and supported by the line ministries, and it's no surprise to see that the majority of these projects are in the renewable energy sector. So, how to translate that into action? The good guidance by IRENA, this accelerator to see the transition of energy, the Energy Transition Accelerator, with adequate financing at the country level is the way to go. We saw some examples, the good promises that we have seen for South Africa during Glasgow, that was followed by other promises of JETP projects in Vietnam and then in Indonesia. What we need to see is more of these projects and to translate all of these kind of global efforts into projects and linking them to a good holistic approach to achieve the SDGs through acceleration of one of the most important and critical vehicles for transformation, which is energy. Having said that, I'd like to again commend the excellent work by IRENA in this area and the good support that we see for the new initiative on the Energy Transition Accelerator financing. And we, from now until November, when we meet again for the COP and the conference of the parties, we need to see significant progress going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency, for your remarks. During the dialogue now, we will hear insights from a high-level panel of speakers on the subject matter. The discussion will be moderated by Dr. Melinda Crane, Chief Political Correspondent at Deutsche Welle TV, followed by member interventions. You have the floor, Dr. Crane.
Thank you very much, dear Chair, Assembly Vice President Henri. Thank you also to all of our keynote speakers for your valuable messages that we will take with us into our panel. And also from my side, dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this ETAF Partners Roundtable session. Before we begin, let me ask all of our panelists, all of our keynote speakers, also the Deputy Director General and Director of Operations of the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, and of course, dear Director General La Camera, to join us on stage for a very quick family photo. So all of you, if you would be so kind as to join us here, then we will do one super fast family photo. Thank you very much for that. I know several of our photo subjects do have to leave the session, so we wanted to make sure to get the full group in. This session, dear ladies and gentlemen, is one of 2 assembly sessions that are organized by IRENA's Project Facilitation and Support Division, and that reflects the central importance of the goal that has just been outlined by the keynote speakers and the Director General, namely massively boosting investment in renewable energy in the developing world. As we've heard again and again throughout the Assembly, we are not where we need to be. To that end, the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform aims to support an initial 1.5 gigawatts of new project developments before 2030. With ETAF now operational and open for project submissions under IRENA's management, we meet here to explore the platform's unique and essential role. And joining us to do that is an absolutely outstanding group of leaders representing ETAF partners and stakeholders and friends. Before I introduce them, let us see a very short video about ETAF and its aims.
Transitioning to a net zero world is one of the greatest challenges humankind faces. To get there, net zero commitments must be backed by concrete action. Renewables are the cheapest form of energy today, providing countries with affordable pathways to climate goals and socio-economic growth.
Our program is to increase the percentage to about 50% using solar with battery systems, and the financing that we gain through IRENA and the ADFD is the largest financing we've received so far to help us to do that.
We have 24 panels on the roof. After the storm, we still have power. You could charge your phones, you could do a whole lot of stuff.
En termes d'accouchement, nos chiffres ont changé parce que les femmes préfèrent venir accoucher chez nous.
Même les élèves, jusqu'à minuit, ils apprennent. Celui qui veut apprendre jusqu'à minuit peut apprendre.
De juin 2021 à décembre 2021, nous avons eu environ 43 gigawatts-heure d'énergie produite, a contribué à alimenter près de 160 000 ménages.
Togo Energy relies heavily on neighboring countries, and introducing renewable energies in Togo production plan allows us to leverage our resources, including water and sun, to produce electricity, and thus reduce the energy dependence on the outside.
But realizing a renewable-based energy future requires close cooperation between public and private sector.
La réalisation de cette centrale-là a mis côte à côte les partenaires financiers et le secteur privé, notamment AMEAS et privé. L'ensemble de tous ces partenaires-là ont travaillé en synergie.
From 2013 to 2020, the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, ADFD, provided $350 million for the IRENA ADFD facility.
The initiative of Abu Dhabi Fund and IRENA, I believe, is a remarkable. That project in Togo, with their support, was an achievement, record time. We are now trying to extend this cooperation to other countries,
attracting $570 million in co-financing for 26 projects, benefiting 4 million people in 21 countries, creating 80,000 jobs.
Our team consists of 10 persons working every day on the project. But besides that, there are a number of other key stakeholders like the vendors that sells materials, the truck drivers, the handlers, and other laborers.
And reducing 500,000 tons of CO2 emission as a result. Now is the time to ensure more people will benefit from the shift to renewables and achieve the climate goals at the same time. IRENA, with the support from the United Arab Emirates, launched a new multi-stakeholder partnership called the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, or ETAF. ETAF aims to accelerate energy transitions by mobilizing and directing $1 billion into renewable energy projects in developing markets. ETAF leverages its partners' financing capabilities and project development expertise to achieve 1.5 gigawatts of new project deployments before 2030.
Organizations like IRENA play a critical role in the energy transition the whole world is aiming for today.
ETAF, accelerating the energy transition towards an inclusive net zero future. Join us. For more information, visit www.etafplatform.org.
Some compelling examples there of why this endeavor is so very important. Just a very quick word on format, if I may. After a round of discussion with the panel, we will open the floor to very brief member country interventions. And looking at our time, I think the window for doing that will indeed be short. Please raise your country nameplate now if you think you wish to comment in that brief window, and our team will make a note of your interest. Because we have a gratifyingly large group of speakers and a limited time frame, I will keep introductions brief. It is now an honor to welcome, and I'll begin with ETAF partners in alphabetical order. Excellency Dr. Abdul Hamid Al Khalifa is Director General at the OPEC Fund for International Development. Welcome to you. Mr. Martin Nagel is advisor in the office of the CEO of Masdar, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company. Mr. Rodrigo Salvado is Director General of the Operational Partnership Development Department at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Great to have you with us. Ms. Veronica Scotti is Chairperson of the Public Sector Solutions and Group Managing Director at the globally active reinsurer Swiss Re. I will now move on to non-ETAF partners, once again in alphabetical order. Mr. Harry Boyd Carpenter is Managing Director of Climate Strategy and Delivery at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD. Ms. Mafalda Duarte is Chief Executive Officer of the Climate Investment Fund. Welcome to you. I'm also very pleased to welcome Ms. Hong Patterson. She is Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer at the Green Climate Fund. Mr. Vivek Pathak is Director and Global Head for Climate Business at the International Finance Corporation. And finally, last is Mr. Ahmed Saeed, Vice President for East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific at the Asian Development Bank. A warm welcome to all of you. We're so grateful that you can join us here. So I'd like to begin with a first round of exchange amongst the ETAF partner organizations on how they envisage their own contributions to the new platform and on how they see its role altogether. And as they've heard several times from me already, we are eager to ensure that interventions do have a length of 3 minutes or less in order to maximize our interaction here. So I will begin, if I may, with Director General Salvado and ask how the AIIB plans to draw on its global outreach and its expertise in financing green infrastructure to contribute to ETAF's objective of supporting countries in accelerating the energy transition, which of course is so very crucial.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much, Belinda. It's great to be here. And again, it's an amazing turnout for something that is happening after lunch. So thank you so much, everyone. As you say, I am representing the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We are actually the youngest of the multilateral development banks that are there. Tomorrow, we actually have our 7th birthday. So it's great to be celebrating here with you, with all of you. We are, a multilateral development bank. We have a global mandate. We have $100 billion in capital. And we are pretty much a climate, a green bank. We have a commitment to get 100% of our operations Paris aligned by the end of 2023. We have also the commitment to have at least 50% of our portfolio in climate-related investments by 2025. And also we are matching that with a private sector focus to have 50% of our operation in private sector by 2030. So with that, two very really quick points, to be very brief. The first one is, I think that it has been implied, but I think that it's important to remain that mobilization have two components. One is to raise and the other one is to spend, right? So far, a lot of the things that we do in mobilization, in our minds, is actually about raising money and getting more. And that's important. It's very, very crucial, of course. But I think that more and more we need to actually start changing, also putting more balance on more emphasis on the spending side. And we are a project bank, right? And we know there have been great initiatives already being created there. So our input is not to create our own, but actually move the money that is already there. So we actually want to bring the pipeline, right? As Director General of IRENA was saying, they are daring us to actually bring the pipeline, and we want to put the pipeline there. I think that we were, thinking on show me the money, now it's show me the projects, right? So we really are, trying to work with partners around that. The second point, I think, is actually on project preparation. I mean, we are talking about accelerator, and again, ETAF is in itself an accelerator platform. But the problem is where you actually accelerate and why you need to accelerate. If you build a very slow car, if you put it on the track, you accelerate the car, you brake the car, and you don't accelerate anything. So the question is how you build the fast car in the very beginning. And that actually is project preparation. So you have to go upstream on that. You have to be working more, with partners. And that money, actually, is hard to get, and the alignment is crucial, right? If all of us are trying to actually get our own thing, our own regulation, our own thing, it's actually going to be very hard. So we need to be working as a one team, right? And if I have really good, regulation from other partners like IFC, like the World Bank, we're just going to take them as good, right? And we are not going to compromise on that, but we don't have to replicate what is already there. So my point is, and be really clear, and very important is that we need to identify the problems. Because if we are catching these things too far down the pipeline, we are not going to accelerate much.
Thank you very much. And let's build on that message. I'll go over to Swiss Re now, if I may, and Group Managing Director Scotty. Swiss Re, of course, has global experience providing risk advisory services as well as de-risking strategies. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how, as a new ETAF partner, you plan to work on reducing barriers, including risk perceptions, to boost investment in energy transition assets. Could we activate that microphone, please?
I think it works now. It was just switched off. Thank you so much, Mrs. Crane. And I'm just going to build on what Salvador has just, our partner, right, in this platform has just said. So I think what we need at the moment is acceleration, and it's a bias towards action. It was said also yesterday, and I really love that expression. And as a company that is dedicated to assessing risks, and this is what we do, I find that for us, the frustrating thing is that often our viewpoint about the risks is not moved upstream fast enough. So this was a key motivation for us to join the ETAF platform, because we believe that having a good risk-informed set of principles included in the upstreaming and in the preparation of the projects can make a huge difference to the bankability of these projects. So let me give very concrete examples, because I come from the business, I'm very grounded. When financiers look to invest in projects, they're looking for those to be in infrastructure space, specifically here. They look for them to be resilient. Resiliency is measured in three ways. The cash flows need to be resilient. The impact and the alignment with the SDG needs to actually align also with ESGs, and therefore they need to be climate resilient, as well as creating good governance and meeting environmental and social impact aspects. So, but there could be shocks to projects. And if we can understand and prepare those projects to be resilient to those shocks upfront, then we're creating bankability. Let me give an example of 4 shocks that can actually manifest itself. Before the project breaks ground, there could be delays related to natural catastrophe or forms of business continuity, and that delay the projects and the cash flow emerging. If we look at the phase where the projects are operational, the revenue reliability becomes very, very important for investors, because that's what banking funds are created around. And if there is volatility in those revenues, then that makes investors question whether they want to invest or not on those projects. There may be issues with frustration of projects, political risk that interferes, and that's also an area of concern. So in all of these situations, actually, insurance can intervene with explicit de-risking very directly, but it needs to be considered as part of the project financing, because if it is included in the project financing structure, then its costs can be better integrated, the cash flow becomes more stable, the cost of financing is reduced, and insurance is not as expensive. And I think this is why we can make a big difference. And we have ample examples of how we made it happen. We are the largest provider of non-funded capital for renewable energy in the world. Just in 2021, we financed over 9,100 projects around the world. a vast majority were renewable energy, but it goes in other, like wind and solar panels, but there are other forms of renewables like biomass and, water tides, ocean tides. So there is an element of innovation that we can introduce. We just have to be part and parcel of the design principle. And of course, we will be anchoring investors in the form of providing the insurance and crowding in others. For me, ETAF is not exclusive to these partners, but we're giving that conviction that it can be done, and then others hopefully will follow in close lockstep.
Thank you very much. And let me stay with the message that we're hearing, that upstream phase is so crucial, and come to Mr. Nagel. Masdar, of course, is known for its project development and technical expertise, and also for its knowledge of the market as an equity investor. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you see Masdar's participation in ETAF helping boost bankability of projects and thereby unleash capital.
Yes, thank you very much for that introduction. Those of you that know Masdar know that we have been around since 2006, and that was a time when renewable energy had very different risk and return characteristics than it had today. So the level of complexity that existed in regulation and technology was huge. And the mission of Masdar was to increase the investment in renewable energy. So what we did as a strategy was we invested in mature markets and mature technologies, and we applied those learnings in markets that were less mature. And as a consequence of that, we also helped develop the renewable energy programs in those markets. And there are many examples of where Masdar has done that. And through the ETAF program, we see our participation as a continuation of these efforts. We see the ETAF program as a systematic way to assess the shortcomings that a particular project will have when it comes to bankability, that the regulations in that particular market will have when it comes to bankability, and to help the regulator and the project developer address those and structure the project so they become bankable. And because this is something that we have been working on, like I said, for a very long time, when renewable energy was a rather obscure niche segment of infrastructure investment. So this is one area. The second area is we also have a global presence in Masdar. We get a lot of requests for collaboration. Some of these requests are at a stage of development where we cannot support them. And with the amount of requests, having something like the ETAF program, which you can channel them to and help support them as part of the ETAF program, where there are other resources, where there are partners that can help you support these programs, we think that is the way to go, and this is why we are so excited about this participation, and we really think this can make a major difference.
Thank you very much for that. Let me go now to Director General Al Khalifa. And as we heard earlier, OPEC's Fund for International Development has just signed, and really just signed on this very day, a heads of terms agreement with IRENA, essentially a statement of intent to join ETAF as a partner. The fund has made a clear commitment to accelerating investment in renewable energy, including, for example, through your new Climate Finance and Energy Innovation Hub. So tell us a bit about your plans, as you would, how you envisage the role of the fund in supporting the ETAF project pipeline that is so very important.
Thank you, Doctor. And let me start by thanking the IRENA and United Arab Emirates government for hosting us, and congratulate them for this successful event. Maybe just to give you a brief background about OPEC Fund for International Development. It's a development institution that was established in 1976. Now it's 47 years, not 7 years. But since then, it has expanded around the world. We have in our portfolio more than 125 countries. And also we are the only global mandated institution with the financing exclusively going to non-members countries. So it is maybe a different institution than other institutions when we are talking about the membership. Speaking about our intention on climate change, we have announced our climate action plan or climate finance action plan back in September, and which was also magnified by 10 Arab-based development institutions, and we announced in Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27 for 24 billion package for climate finance. So that is maybe a quick background. Going back to your question and how can we help on making things happen when in our cooperation with IRENA, I think through three main elements. First of all is putting more financing directed to climate change, and this is what our action plan is directed to do, is to double our financing directed to climate change by 2030. So we will have double the resources that are available now for climate change in 2030. This is one. Second, through partnerships. Our business model is based on partnerships with others, and we have an ability to leverage our contributions, and we are doing that with a long list of partners, and we proud to have this signature today. It is part of that work, and we will be more than happy to make sure that things happen on that angle. The third angle is innovations, and innovations here, I'm not talking only for technological or technology innovations, but also financing processes and other innovations that makes the transaction cost very low, which is at the benefit of the beneficiary parts. So we have already with other international organizations set up a climate finance and energy innovation hub, which is directed toward that goal, and we hope this will be also making sure our cooperation with IRENA will benefit from that innovation hub. So through those three elements, we hope that we will make things happen.
Thank you very much, Director General Al Khalifa. And we have just heard from ETAF partners, but collaboration at ETAF definitely does not stop there. So we would now like to move on to key stakeholders who have indicated their interest in working with the Accelerator platform. And I'm going to ask them to share their vision for ETAF, as well as their own lessons learned in lowering barriers to investment in energy transition assets and making effective use of innovative financial instruments. You just underlined the importance of innovation, Director General, for that purpose. And again, I'll just remind everybody we are very grateful for 3 minutes or less. So I'd like to begin with Vice President Said. And one of the mandates, of course, of the Asian Development Bank is to increase access to reliable, affordable, low-carbon energy across Asia and the Pacific. So please share your experience in helping to scale up renewable energy projects in the regions where you are responsible.
Thank you.
Could we activate that mic, please?
You might need to press the button. It sounds like I needed to activate it, so my apologies. And thank you. It's an honor to be here and a privilege to attend the IRENA Summit. There are many lessons we could point to, but one very important one builds on a theme that Veronica mentioned. And I think one thing we've learned in our work is that we need to build risk-taking capacity in the system. We need both organizations that are willing to risk, and we need to invest in building the instruments of risk transfer. And this is important because there's a great deal of things that make sense that are not happening. Not that require subsidies, but that make sense because we aren't able to appropriately allocate those risks. And those risks aren't just financial. We all know about financial risk. They can also be operational. They can be reputational. They can be political. Let me give 3 examples from our work at ADB where we're trying to own some of those risks that we feel we're able to. Financial risk, we're increasingly looking to credit enhance offtake agreements in order to make them bankable. Operational risk, we're working with governments to take pieces of the operational puzzle of project delivery out of the hands of the private sector and to develop them with government. We did this very successfully in Cambodia, a small country that nevertheless, through a process we designed with them, managed to get the lowest bid for solar on a tender across all of Southeast Asia, a region which has other countries that are sometimes viewed as more bankable. The most interesting in some ways is reputational risk. Transition finance is an enormously important space. We've done things at ADB where we've been willing to stick our neck out knowing that financial institutions, because reporting requirements don't necessarily closely map onto what we'd like them to do, see reputational risk. And by going first as an organization, we create space. These are all examples of where risk is misappropriately priced or misaligned in the system. And I think that that problem is one of the more significant ones, preventing the subset of things that should be happening, that can happen, from happening. And so maybe I'll just leave it with that thought as one lesson learned from our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me go over to Managing Director Boyd Carpenter now and ask you to talk about also how you see productive opportunities for cooperation between your own division at the EBRD and the ETAF, especially within the framework of the EBRD's project cycle and this imperative need indeed to boost bankability on projects.
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you to IRENA for the invitation and to Abu Dhabi for the hospitality. I actually made a mistake in preparing for this. I wrote down ETAP instead of F, and looking at it, I thought, oh, what do I mean here? P must be for partnership, and I realize now that it's for platform, but I actually think I got something right in making a mistake because this is really about partnership. Projects like this, renewable energy projects are large, they're long-lived, they're complex, and they only work if there's a very strong partnership behind them. And I think that's what we see as our role working with ETAF and indeed with all of the others, so whether it's co-financiers, whether it's governments, whether it's the sponsors, even the contractors and the suppliers for these projects. And I think just picking up some of the themes that others have referenced, the fundamental thing for us is to make sure that the underlying commercial and contractual framework for a project works. These projects are too big and too long-lived to be kept alive if they're not fundamentally commercially sound. If they don't have the right economics underlying them and the right allocation of risk, fair allocation of risk, they'll collapse. They might collapse before you get there because project development fails. Worse, they might collapse after you've built them. So I think what we expect is a collaboration with ETAF and with the other partners upstream in designing the frameworks, in putting together robust frameworks that work for all of the parties involved. Then in the project delivery, the implementation period, and then finally in the project implementation period. So I think sticking strictly to my time limit, that's the key element for us, a partnership across the project cycle.
Thank you very much. A great message rendered in a very short amount of time. Let me go over to Director Patak, if I may. As the arm of the World Bank responsible for private sector development in developing countries, maybe you could share key lessons learned in the context of the IFC's climate business, also as it relates to financing the energy transition, and how you've overcome challenges that have emerged.
Sure.
Well, first and foremost, good afternoon to you all, and a big thank you to the government of the UAE and to IRENA. So I think 5 things that we've seen over the past 30 years or so that we've been in renewable energy, most important coming first and foremost is rule of law, transparency, fair concessions, and a system that works when it comes to things like dispute resolution. So investors need to get comfortable when they're putting their money into a country and a sector that they will be treated fairly. Second, very, very important, blended finance. We've seen a lot of it come. People don't appreciate the extent to which blended finance has been successful in driving down costs. You need blended finance at scale. And I'm not just talking about global blended finance. When a country signs a contract or a concession at 23 cents, which is where prices were many years ago, 28 cents, and cost of thermal is half, they're actually providing a fair amount of subsidy. So blended finance has been a big important factor. We've had technological advancements when it comes to things like solar panels, and that's been very helpful. And all that has resulted in scale, and that's what drove costs down. But very critical, and I think you mentioned it, Salvador, is the importance of upstream project preparation. And we at IFC actually set up a whole unit comprising of almost 250, 300 people that really focuses on the upstream part. What do we need going forward is all of the above on steroids at a scale we've never seen before. We also need a lot more innovation. We need a lot more technological advances when it comes to things like storage technologies. We need to also look at old sectors, which we've not scaled up. Things like waste to energy, biogas, offshore wind, and some new sectors are going to emerge, like I think Veronica mentioned, using water tides. Yeah. We also need to do an end-to-end value chain analysis because that's critical. We don't want to solve a problem today and land up with millions of solar panels a few years down the road or hundreds of thousands of batteries. We also need, very importantly, and this is something very close to my heart, is to develop domestic capital markets. Because what we're not realizing is one of the reasons costs are not being reflected is most tariffs around the world are denominated in US dollars and cents. And because of that, borrowing is in that currency or the other way around. We need to be connecting domestic capital, domestic savings into climate. And as Mahmoud said, we need to bring down the cost of capital using that. Last but not least, perception of risk. Ahmad, you talked about it, so I won't elaborate too much. But we need to be able to determine that just because it's a developing country, risks are high. I don't think all developing countries are equal, and we need to get that idea that different countries have treated investors differently, and we need a far more accurate analysis of perception of these risks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Quite a bit of synergy on these messages that we're hearing. Greatly appreciated. Let me go over to CFO and COO Patterson now, if I may, and ask you to tell us something about the Green Climate Fund's experience in helping scale up renewable energy projects in developing countries, and including which particular financing instruments you consider particularly effective.
Great, thank you. Very, very good thanks to IRENA for inviting us here, as well as the government of the UAE. I guess, I'm alongside some very illustrious people, and we are one of the younger organizations as well, operational just over 7 years. But the establishment of the GCF as part of the Paris Agreement as the financial mechanism, I think being as young, it really allows us to use the financial instruments under our roster in a very, very efficient manner. So we are just as efficient in deploying grants and loans as we are in equity. And I think that that is really important in terms of triggering market and signaling the market. Now, when it comes to our portfolio, we are the largest climate-focused fund with about $42 billion in our portfolio, but a quarter of that is alongside energy generation and access. And despite the barriers that we are seeing, I think that there are real opportunities out there to really make changes in the market. So I don't think that there's any particular financial instrument, just to answer your question specifically, that would be the magic to everything. I think we really do need to assess and understand what is the need out there. So rather than spending too much time in terms of the GCF, I think if I can just use my last minute to talk about an example that we have that we worked on with Egypt. And our proposition is quite unique because we are country driven in the sense that we will work with countries to really understand what their national contributions and what their goals are and how do we contribute to that. So it's that upstream that we've been talking about as well as actual implementation. So the renewable energy financing framework that we established with them in 2017, we provided a $150 million concessional loan alongside a grant, a small grant for technical assistance. And that technical assistance was meant to look at how the reverse auctions and whether there could be good, effective tariff discovery. Off the back of that, actually, the government of Egypt actually executed reverse auctions within 2 years of the approval of this project. And it actually brought down the price of bids from 8.5 cents down to 3 cents. And so it really showed that huge success. Not only that, but then our loans that were put out there, so looking at the entire life cycle, not just at the front end, but throughout that lending and helping support that financing that's required. What happened was that the private sector came in a real way. Our loans were actually paid back this past year. This was supposed to be an 18-year program, and what we saw is that these loans were actually replaced by bonds. Bond issuances, and by the time that the bond issuances happened last year, our loans were paid back. So 18 years down to 5 years.
Great example. Thank you so much. Finally, let me go over to CEO Duarte to talk about the World Bank's Climate Investment Fund and how you can perhaps share a few lessons learned. You are, of course, a leading multilateral climate finance partnership that also channels concessional finance to climate positive initiatives. So again, what would be your key lessons learned that you can share with ETAF from which they hopefully can benefit?
On? Yes. So let me also thank Irina for inviting us to be here and thank the hospitality of UAE government. The climate investment funds have been supporting developing countries for 15 years. Energy transition has been one of our strategic investment areas. We work with a set of multilateral development banks, 3 of them here in this panel. And we have invested more than $6 billion in energy access, clean energy access, and clean energy transition, and mobilized around 10 times that level of investment. And as the colleague from Masdar was saying, this was in the early days of renewable energy investments, where we weren't really seeing such investments in developing countries. So we financed a lot of the first, second, third of its kind and drove the creation of markets and helped bring down the cost curves and helped establish track record in these markets. And the type of finance that we provide is the type of finance that Mr. Muhyiddin was talking about when he made his intervention, is low cost, risk-taking, long grace periods, long maturities to really bring down the cost of capital and tackle risks that others are not well placed to take. So we have seen the power of this finance, but it's also important for the finance to be flexible. And so in terms of the financial instruments that can be used, we have ample flexibility in terms of the financial toolkit, but also the possibility of working on project preparation where it's needed, working with governments on policy and the regulatory, so the upstream work, and then being able to then finance the transactions themselves. My colleague here from EBRD talked about, I think we have such a massive challenge ahead of us because despite the progress that we have seen, the scale of what's necessary going forward is so significant that we can only achieve this in partnership, in strong partnerships. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and Mr. Murhaidin also mentioned in his intervention, that we are seeing efforts like the JETPs, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, to really bring together key players into larger investment plans where everybody can bring to bear their technical and financial comparative advantages and capacities to the table. So we have, and I'm mindful of time, I think I've already gone over my 3 minutes, but just to say that we very much look forward to, with our implementing partners, the multilateral development banks, working with IRENA and ETAF or ETAP, in the areas that will be a focus to us. We are, energy transition will continue to be a priority area for us, and we are particularly interested in coal transition. We are investing significantly in coal transition, renewable energy integration investments, so storage, transmission, infrastructure, smart grid management, but also we are now starting on the industrial decarbonization side, where there's a lot of need to also make clean energy investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking around the room, I do not see country nameplates up, and since we're nearly out of time, I'm going to assume that that perception, which has also been shared by our IRENA team members, they also say they have not received pre-register comments. I'm going to say that instead of now opening the floor, I will ask all of our panelists, this will come as a bit of a surprise to them given the limitations of our time, to really in one sentence tell us their key priorities for ETAF going forward. So whatever it is, whether it's the kind of projects, the additional partners, whatever you think is most important. And I'll just go straight down the panel with the request for very, very short contributions, starting here with Rodrigo Savar.
Okay, so I think, PPP is pipeline, right? So basically, I think that is our aim here. I think that all the things that were done and said right now is great, but I think that we don't have to do everything. Each of us, they have to do everything, right? We don't have to. We have to complement each other, right? For risk-taking, for capital, for exposure, for project preparation. So the key thing is actually to bring the partnership to this point of actually how we're going to complement each other and actually do it well. So I think that division of labor, and build fast and reliable cars, I think that's good.
Thank you so much. Mr. Patak.
So I would add a fourth P. We talk about public-private partnerships, but it's for the people. So I think we really need to focus going forward on affordability, driving prices down, and that's what's going to make sure that penetration levels go up. And I think that affordability piece for the people is going to be critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Patterson.
Thank you. So for us, I think that what ETAF can really bring is innovation, and what we can do is actually help to execute that innovation and really transform the market.
Mr. Saeed.
I think if ETAF can successfully be a force multiplier and not a work multiplier, then it will be a great success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Al-Khalifa.
Yeah, I think it's two partnerships and innovations. And as I said before, innovation is not limited to technology innovations, but financial procedures and other innovations that helps the implementation.
Ms. Duarte.
Did I connect? Yes. I think, colleagues are saying, and I also mentioned in my intervention, is really about seeking strong partnerships, relevant partnerships with others, and so that we basically make sure that there's complementarity and that the sum of these partnerships are greater than its parts.
For me, for my direct partners on ETAF, is very much about streamlining and very fast triaging so that we can demonstrate that the platform really, really works, and interfacing with others in very complementary ways.
Thank you. Mr. Boyd Carpenter.
So I managed to add 3 more Ps. Proper prices, please. Meaning proper, correct, unsubsidized prices for conventional energy and ever lower prices for renewable?
Thank you very much. Mr. Nagel.
So thank you for this question. I think the partners we currently have in the program are equity partners and banking partners. And I would love to see us complementing this with partners who can provide grants for developers, because I think that's really what is required to accelerate the financing, the bankability of projects. If we have new contributors which are willing and able to provide development grants aligned with their KPIs and objectives, that is what we would strengthen our joint efforts, and I think that should be a priority for the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think if the medium is the message, then what we've heard here today is a very optimistic message indeed. We're seeing partnership here quite visibly in this very large and very impressive group of ETAF partners and friends of ETAF. I would like to give all of our panel, please, a very, very warm round of applause for their contributions. Very thought-provoking exchange. And my thanks also to IRENA's Project Facilitation and Support Division for their very hard work in organizing this valuable session. And with that, I also say thank you to all of you, Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen in the audience, for your attention and your own contributions and support for this new endeavor. And with that, I hand back to the session chair.
Thank you, Dr. Crane. Thank you very much for guiding this discussion. And let me also express my sincerest gratitude to all participants. I think it's obvious it was a very important matter, and in general, the financement, the acceleration of the transition, it will remain a very important matter also in the following discussion. For example, in the next COP here in the region, in the end of the year, I think it will remain very, very important. Thank you all for a positive and constructive dialogue. This concludes our consideration on agenda item 11. Thank you very much.
Please sit down. Let's begin. This is agenda item number 12, reports from ministerial meetings and other events. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to begin by thanking the Vice Presidents for chairing the ministerial dialogue on behalf of the Presidency. I now invite the Assembly to turn to agenda item number 12, reports from ministerial meetings and other events. Under this item, the Assembly will hear reports from the Ministerial Roundtable held on the 14th of January 2023 and the Ministerial and high-level stakeholder meetings held on the 13th of January 2023. I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Thomas Anker Christensen, the Climate Ambassador of Denmark at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities to report to the Assembly on the discussions of the Ministerial Roundtable on decarbonizing shipping. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to report back on the Ministerial Roundtable on decarbonizing shipping and the role of ports in addressing supply, demand, and trade of renewable-based fuels. The conversation was very insightful, stimulating, and of high political relevance. It was great to witness how the discussion on the shipping sector has changed over the last few years, from the problems in addressing an emitting sector to a narrative around the new opportunities that the transition toward renewable fuels will bring to the sector. This is evident from the statements heard at the roundtable on the multiple initiatives and increasing commitment from governments and the private sector, and in particular, by the increasing number of calls for a net zero goal by 2050 in the new IMO strategy, a goal that a majority of governments agree with. It was a very rich dialogue with many topics and views covered, and I will draw out a few of the points that stood out from the discussion. Number one, it was encouraging to listen to multiple countries and ports sharing the various initiatives and progress made. The status of technology in terms of the engines is also very promising. Number two, to address the gap on competitiveness of green fuels, we simultaneously need to build both supply and demand for those fuels across all end-use sectors, not just shipping. This will create economies of scale and new business opportunities around the trade of these green fuels. Number three, to increase demand, long-term clarity on policy and regulation, ideally through an IMO agreement on net zero shipping by 2050, aligned with the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement, will be key to create conditions to give long-term security to investors. We also need clarity on harmonized certification of green fuels and safety standards to further enable trade and investments. Number four, moving into specific collaborative instruments between ports, green shipping corridors are emerging, and helping to demonstrate and scale the decarbonization of the sector. Several countries pointed at this solution, and announcements are very promising. It shows that bottom-up bilateral and multilateral actions can pave the way to broader multilateral agreements. Number five, another key point is that there will be no unique fuel. The future of shipping will be multi-fuel. This has clear implications for the development of ports and bunkering infrastructure, as well as shipbuilding and maritime technologies such as engines, which will have a pivotal role to play in this transformation. The final point, the sixth point I would like to highlight, is the importance of the international cooperation between governments, but also the public and the private sectors, coalitions, and alliances such as, and I'll just mention a few, which came up in the conversation, the Getting to Zero Coalition, the Clydebank Declaration for Green Shipping Corridors, the Zero Emission Shipping Mission under Mission Innovation, and the Green Shipping Challenge, as well as the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. Roundtable participants called IRENA, with its analytical competence and convening power to bring actors together, to share experiences and to provide the knowledge needed for countries to develop and implement the solutions we need. So, in conclusion, I want to thank my fellow panelists and Irina for this informative discussion, and I look forward to witnessing the further developments in this area. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your report. I now invite Her Excellency, Mr. Samuel Phipps, Jr., President of the Republic of Palau, to report to the Assembly on the discussions of the SIDS Ministerial. You have the floor, Mr. President.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to deliver the SIDS Ministerial meeting results. The small island states and developmental partners had a meaningful session on Friday. And allow me to reassert the key messages conveyed. Speaking with a unified voice, small island developing states call for appropriate financing, technology, and capacity support that must be provided at scale. We believe it's time to move from formulation, i.e. assessment and negotiations, to really implementation. It's time for less talk and more action. Bureaucratic processes must be simplified or streamlined, allowing access to the necessary financial support that SIDS need to accelerate the energy transition and climate action efforts. The global economy must focus on getting back on track to the 1.5-degree pathway in the lead up to COP28. As large ocean states, SIDS must accelerate the development of ocean energy technologies and look into emerging technologies such as green hydrogen, battery storage, and the accelerated development of other renewables such as geothermal, solar, wind, biomass, and hydro. Energy policy and regulatory frameworks, including fossil fuel mitigation frameworks, are critical when engaging with the international community. And the uptake of renewables in SIDS is not only about climate mitigation, but it is also about adaptation and a resilient development, addressing food and water security, health, socioeconomic development, lives and livelihoods. Private sector engagement and strategic, genuine partnerships must be considered as key drivers of accelerating the energy transition in SIDS, and they must be aligned with SIDS priorities. It is vital for SIDS that appropriate financing mechanisms and the implementation of the Loss and Damage Fund are operational at COP28. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I reiterate that SIDS need more than handshakes. There must be financing and meaningful partnerships to secure our future, not just that of SIDS, but of all of us. To conclude, I'd like to share a phrase from a Palauan chant. It goes like this: Aleru bralet en maknit, at a talbagal, en ungil en diakadagol. The chant reminds us that we are in one canoe, and if two people are trying to steer in opposite directions, we risk capsizing the canoe. It imparts the wisdom of working together with one focus to reach the destination safely and efficiently. We must give our children hope. A healthy and resilient future our children and our grandchildren deserve depends on us working together, staying focused on keeping below 1.5 and creating a net zero future. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now invite Ms. Elvira Lapros Pratos, the Chief of Staff of Acciona, to report to the Assembly on the discussions on public-private dialogue. You have the floor, Ms. Pepros.
Dear President of the IRENA Assembly, dear IRENA Director General Francesco La Camera, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to report back from the 7th Public-Private Dialogue on behalf of the IRENA Coalition for Action. First of all, I would like to thank IRENA and its members for providing this opportunity for non-state actors and companies like Acciona to engage and share their views on some key issues in relation to the energy transition. The coalition has been steadily expanding, with over 130 members now across the private sector, industry associations, civil society, and research institutes. It provides a platform for the key renewable energy players to share knowledge and best practices and identify actions to accelerate. Last year, intensifying climate events and the global energy crisis underscored the close interlinkages of the environment, society, and economy. It is increasingly recognized that socioeconomic conditions must be put at the core of the energy transition, beyond technological and cost debate. During the dialogue, the stakeholders agreed that we need an energy transition that is just for workers and communities. It is encouraging that this concept is gaining traction in climate policies and discussions. IRENA's analysis shows that more jobs will be created than lost in the energy transition. With adequate policies and scale-up investment, jobs in renewable energy could reach almost 40 million by 2030. Renewable energy also fares better than conventional energy in gender balance. However, women currently account for 1/3 of the renewable workforce, so there is still room for improvement. The energy transition provides an opportunity to render our energy systems more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive. Nevertheless, proactive efforts, certainty, and enabling policies are needed to address potential misalignments along the way and reskill workers losing their jobs. I would like to highlight 3 key points from this public-private dialogue. Number 1, a number of examples already exist. We can learn from these initiatives and scale up the elements of success. Social dialogue, inclusive processes, building on local strengths, anticipating changes, and planning in advance. Exchange in best practices is crucial to enable capacity building and knowledge sharing. Number 2, there is already a lack of a skilled workforce to drive the energy transition. Governments and the private sector all have a role to play in equipping the workforce for a net zero future. Diversity is key. Women, youth, and minorities represent a critical talent pool. More efforts are needed to remove biases and barriers and render the energy sector more attractive. And number 3, countries face different challenges and many only have limited resources to confront them. In regions with low energy access or those that rely heavily on fossil fuels, the just transition will look very different. Mobilizing resources for developing countries and engaging all stakeholders in the social dialogue is of essence. We need long-term plans to favor investment in renewables and protect workers whose livelihoods depend on fossil fuels. We also must go beyond the number of jobs created and focus on quality, creating a healthy growth of the whole value chain, being careful of excessive industry-wide cost pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, decisive action is needed from governments to lead the system transformation, guided by long-term, real commitment, just transition principles, and adequate financing to tackle misalignments in labor markets and beyond. We can only achieve the energy transition at the scale and pace needed if we understand the needs of all stakeholders and we put people at its core. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Thank you. I now invite Dr. Kande Yimkela, the Member of Parliament of Sierra Leone, to report to the Assembly on the discussions of the 2023 legislature floor. You have the floor, Dr. Mukala.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present the 2023 IRENA Legislators Forum reports to the 13th Assembly. 100 legislators representing over 50 countries met to hold the 8th IRENA Legislators Forum hosted by the International Renewable Energy Agency on 13th of January 2023 to discuss about the theme ensuring a more sustainable energy transition through international cooperation, national strategies on green hydrogen. Discussions focused on the significant role of the green hydrogen that green hydrogen can have in accelerating the energy transition while contributing to energy security, industrial competitiveness, reduced air pollution, economic growth, and job creation. Participants also emphasized how green hydrogen can support the implementation of international and national commitments under the Paris Agreement and achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Participants at the IRENA Legislators Forum highlighted the key role of parliaments in promoting the adoption of policy priorities to support the development of green hydrogen projects. They also noted the need for including local and regional coordination as well as international cooperation and encouraged IRENA to facilitate and coordinate regional parliamentary groups to discuss and promote actions to accelerate the energy transformation with a focus on renewable energy. To enable this transformation, participants highlighted parliamentary and regulatory actions that may be necessary for promoting green hydrogen development, adapted and tailored for the needs of specific countries. International cooperation was emphasized as the means to foster fair access to technology, knowledge, and capital on green hydrogen. Participants further highlighted the need for parliaments and regulators to do the following. 1, define national green hydrogen strategies with clear indication of the level of ambition for hydrogen. 2, outline the amount of support required, financial and knowledge and skills required. 3, provide a reference on hydrogen development for private investment and finance to further enhance international cooperation while promoting the setup of local value chains. 4, stimulate the decarbonization of industries. 5, create new jobs and ensure greater social equity. Participants of the 2023 IRENA Legislators Forum renewed their commitment and political will as parliamentarians to leverage their legislative oversight as well as their representation functions in promoting the deployment of renewable energy projects and accelerating global energy transitions. In concluding the 2023 IRENA Legislators Forum, the participants once again welcomed the forum as an effective platform to facilitate the exchange of knowledge and national experiences and to foster sustained constructive dialogue, accentuating the multiple interlinkages of the energy transition with the development of renewable energy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mukala. I now invite Ms. Ishita Yadav, IRENA Youth Dialogue and Regional Focal Point for South Asia of SDG 7 Youth Constituency to report to the Assembly on the discussions of the 2023 IRENA Youth Forum. You have the floor, Ms. Yadav.
Your Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, and resilient youth from across the globe. My name is Ishita Yadav, and I'm a youth leader from India. I am pleased to share on behalf of the IRENA Global Council on Enabling Youth Action on SDG 7 and all youth delegates present today, the outcome of the 2023 IRENA Youth Forum. Under the theme, Empowering Youth to Lead an Equitable Energy Transition for a Sustainable Future, the forum convened over 100 young delegates from 45 different countries with the objective of producing concrete recommendations to policymakers, legislators, private sector, and other stakeholders. But before giving our recommendations, let me remind you of where we are. Right here, right now, we convene under complex environmental circumstances. In the past year, we have witnessed shocking, record-breaking extremes, a catastrophe that has probed scientists to call it code red for humanity. Yet, current policies are set to increase warming temperatures by 3 degrees Celsius, which will cause mass extinction to our own species. But there is hope. Hope for a future that is 100% renewable. And not in 30 years. It will be too late by then. So here are 3 youth recommendations that must be implemented to turn our hope into action. Firstly, unlocking finance to enhance scalability of renewable energy. Currently, only 0.74% of climate finance goes to youth, and only a small fraction of that is dedicated to renewable energy solutions. Without flexible, innovative financing mechanisms, those who are most impacted cannot scale their initiatives. However, funding youth without skills development will not yield results. Hence, the right skills and expertise required to serve the job market should be prioritized. Secondly, to the members of the IRENA Assembly, leave no one behind in your quest to achieve 100% renewable energy. This cannot be done without empowering youth in energy policy at the national and international levels. We are a source of capital that can be leveraged to achieve the future we want. If the future is really about us, then nothing about us without us. We call on IRENA members to include youth in their delegation to this assembly. We want to see 168 members, 168 youth delegates. Lastly, climate change is energy change. At COP28, we call on you and your delegations to go all out for 100% renewables. To demonstrate that you are truly pro-renewables and to be remembered for your leadership, you must deliver a 100% renewable agenda at COP28. We cannot settle for anything less. Renewables work, and they're here to stay. There's political will and momentum from both the public and private sector. It is now time to turn our commitments into action. There have been applaudable achievements, but there is still a long way to go to accomplish the future we seek. We're all in this together, and we can achieve this hope. But you're the ones in the decision-making positions, so we count on you. Don't fail us. Don't fail your kids. Don't fail humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yadav. I now invite Ms. Victoria Holt. There is also some poem. There is a poem? Yes. Okay. Mr. Howard Mifsiga? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President and Your Excellencies. My name is Howard, and I'm a youth delegate, and I'll be presenting a poem on the nexus between renewables and climate change on behalf of the youth delegates. Enjoy. It is high time we did some rethinking. Can't you see that our world is vanishing? Our planet is sinking with the calamitous and catastrophic carbon emissions, with the disastrous aid and everything that we see, seeing that we are in a world that is very volatile. We see hazardous El Nino rains, and we see floods, and we see that our world is sinking, our world is vanishing. And yes, we must act now. Renewables are the solution, and we must walk the climate action talk. We must walk beyond that which we have said now and walk it into action. We must renew our commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, we see that there is a nexus between climate change and renewables. We must renew our commitment in the sense that we see that we are here and we talk, but we do not see action. Indeed, we must renew our commitment. We must renew our commitment to coalescing and synergizing and investing heavily in renewables, heavily in climate action in our communities. We must desert the disastrous three: coal, gas, and fossil fuels. Instead, we must invest heavily in renewables, in the big five, in solar, in hydro, in geothermal, in biomass, and in wind. Ladies and gentlemen, now more than ever, we are faced with that pressing need, the need to walk the climate action talk beyond the rhetorical creed. We must desert the disastrous three. We must invest heavily in the five. In the five, that is where our hope lies, our hope for humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a clarion call. It is a clarion call to you, to us, to the entire global establishment, that with renewables, we can and we must renew our commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard Brisker, for the inspiring poem. I now invite Ms. Victoria Holt, the Director at the John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding, the Dartmouth Center, to report to the Assembly on the discussions of the high-level meeting on the Energy Compact on renewable energy for United Nations peacekeeping. You have the floor, Ms. Holt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Director General, and thank you, youth, for energizing us. I, too, will be reporting on an event that had not happened before here at the Assembly. It's the high-level meeting on the Energy Compact on renewable energy for UN peacekeeping held on Friday, January 13th. We had an innovative, first-of-its-kind event that brought together high-level national representatives, the United Nations, peacekeeping leaders from the field and headquarters, as well as business, research organizations, civil society, international development funders on this key initiative. Participating countries included South Sudan, Cyprus, Mali, Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, among others, who identified their goals and their needs to increase renewable energy options and their desire to work on the specific projects identified within this new compact. They welcomed a partnership with the United Nations. So specifically, participants rolled up their sleeves and they discussed how to develop these specific projects in these countries that are alongside UN peacekeeping operations, who can serve as an anchor client to increase access to renewable energy in conflict-affected and climate-affected communities and meet the country's climate goals, their needs for access to energy, and use the buying power of UN missions to jumpstart that. That's a lot, so let me back up for a moment and note what participants were talking about. First, they recognize that UN peacekeeping missions are often the largest energy generators and consumers in the nations to which they deploy. These nations are characterized often by low electrification rates. This is an opportunity to direct that investment in energy by both the UN and its partners in a way that contributes to the growth of host state sustainable energy infrastructure. So, our conversation noted a few other points. That UN peacekeeping missions themselves benefit from renewable energy. Only 6% today of mission energy sources are renewable. The rest is based on diesel for electricity. Peacekeeping can account for the largest single source of greenhouse emissions in some of the countries in which they operate. In some missions, the security required to deliver fuel and have supply chains operate is highly inefficient, very ineffective, and can draw insecurity. So by shifting to more renewable energy for the purposes of the UN missions themselves, they can benefit. They can better meet their mandates, support peace building and peacekeeping, lower their emissions, save costs, and be a better partner with their host government. The big picture, the UN Secretary General committed at the 2019 Climate Summit that UN operations would be 80% based on renewable energy by 2030. So today, if they're at 6%, we have a ways to go. It also would further the SDG goals, build peace building, and support a positive legacy if this partnership between host nations and UN missions, as well as the other actors I've mentioned, could work together on the compact. The host nations themselves all spoke and said, we welcome this partnership. They recognize the need to build energy capacity and access for their populations in line with meeting their climate and SDG goals. They cited the low rate of electrification and called for this partnership to work. Third, participants welcomed the Energy Compact's specific projects, of which we have a good list across 6 countries today and could be growing as more projects are offered up for this partnership. Implementing the compact could help build out further support if we increasingly work with a research agenda, analysis of de-risking and financing, increasing private sector engagement, linking national ministries, peacekeeping missions, and the business community, and working with development and finance actors. So, in short, this is the beginning of a needed public-private partnership across civil society and governments, the United Nations, and communities such as the one I stand in front of. The discussion is also looking forward to the coming year and high-level events, including the SDG 7 High-Level Political Forum, COP28, which we hope to participate in on this topic, the Peacekeeping Ministerial in December 2023, and of course, returning to IRENA. The participants also wanted to thank the leadership of IRENA and the UN Department of Support and Peacekeeping for their MOU, development of the compact, and leadership to move it forward. Thanks to the UAE and Norway for their leadership and collaboration with the Powering Peace Initiative, led by Energy Peace Partners and the Stimson Center, as well as the enduring support of Denmark and other nations. So in closing, I'll just say this is the beginning, not the end of a conversation, and we welcome working with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sold. Now the proposal is that the Assembly take note of the reports presented under this agenda item. So, any objections? Yes or no? So decided. The Assembly takes note of the reports which have been presented.